Jesus speaks to the heart of every soul that searches for light, reminding humanity that love is the greatest command, the greatest strength, and the greatest path toward peace. And he calls every person to walk with a spirit free from hatred, fear, and bitterness, choosing instead compassion, mercy, and forgiveness, even when the world feels heavy and unkind. Because the kingdom of God grows inside those who choose goodness, in silence and humility. And he tells us not to worry about tomorrow, for the Father knows every need before it is spoken, urging us to trust with a faith that stands, even when storms rise. For he is the calm in the center of every storm, and the hope in the darkest midnight. And he invites the weary, the broken, and the forgotten to come to him. For his rest is deeper than sleep, and his peace is stronger than any trouble. And he reminds us that blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. And he teaches that the treasure of life is not found in gold, fame, or power, but in kindness freely given, in forgiveness offered when it is hardest, in loving even those who stand against us. Because such love transforms the world and brings heaven near. And he promises that whoever walks in truth walks in light, and whoever chooses light becomes a beacon for others. And he assures every soul that no pain is invisible to God. No tear is forgotten. No prayer is ignored. No life is without purpose. For the Father holds each person with unending grace. And Jesus calls us to lift our eyes, to rise from despair, to stand in courage, to believe in miracles, to live with purity, to help the poor, to protect the weak, to heal with words and actions, to forgive 70 times 7, to walk the extra mile, to love without limits, and to hold on to faith even when the path ahead is unclear. For those who believe will find strength beyond their own, hope brighter than morning light, and a peace that the world cannot take away. Jesus speaks again to every weary heart, telling humanity that the Father's love is wider than the oceans and deeper than the universe, and that no matter how far someone feels, no matter how lost or broken or unworthy they think they are, heaven is always reaching out with open arms, calling each person by name, reminding us that true strength is not found in lifting heavy burdens, but in lifting others. Crowds followed him, not only because of the miracles they had seen, but because every word from his mouth felt like living water to souls that had been dry for years. He spoke with an authority that did not crush, but lifted, an authority wrapped in gentleness, truth, and mercy. As people gathered around him with empty hands, weary hearts, and long histories of pain, Jesus saw beyond their faces. He saw their stories, their silent tears, their hidden battles, and with a love deeper than the oceans, he said, "Come to me, all who are tired and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." And suddenly the weight that had rested on them for so long seemed lighter, because they knew they stood before the one who could truly heal them. And Jesus reached out to the lonely, the rejected, the forgotten, the ones whose voices had been ignored by the world, and he said, "You are seen, you are loved, you are not alone." Mothers brought sick children to him with trembling hands, and he touched them with a tenderness that made even the strongest men weep. And fevers left, pain vanished, and life returned to their eyes. Fishermen, farmers, widows, beggars, wealthy men, and people with nothing but the clothes on their backs all stood together, because in his presence every barrier fell. Jesus fed not only their stomachs but their spirits, filling them with peace that felt like a soft blanket around the heart. And as the sun set behind the hills and cast golden light across the crowd, Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven and prayed for them, not just for their needs of today, but for their eternal future. For he came not only to give bread for the moment, but salvation for forever. And with every prayer, he whispered every healing. He offered every word. He spoke, the people felt something awakening inside them, a hope, faith, a sense that God himself was reaching out with open arms. And in that moment they understood. Jesus does not just heal bodies. He heals lives. He heals hearts. He heals the broken pieces no one else can reach. And the people stayed close to Jesus, unwilling to leave the presence that made them feel more alive than they had ever felt before. Because in his voice they heard truth that cut through every lie they had believed about themselves. Jesus walked among them with steps full of compassion, stopping for each person, as if there were no crowds, no noise, no pressures. Only a single soul, worth all the time in the world. The hungry pressed near, not only for bread, but for the comfort he carried, like a radiant flame. And Jesus, seeing their longing, lifted his hands and blessed them. And it was as though heaven itself opened over them. Those who were broken on the inside felt something shifting, something softening, as if his very presence was stitching together the wounds they never dared to show. And Jesus spoke again, words overflowing with divine tenderness. The Father knows your needs. Do not be afraid. You are valued more than the birds of the sky and the flowers of the field. These words fell into their hearts like healing oil, soothing places that had been aching for years. Those who had been abandoned felt claimed. Those who had been ashamed felt restored, and those who had wandered felt found. Even the children gathered around him, tugging at his robe with innocent hands, and he knelt down to their level, blessing them with a smile that carried the kindness of heaven. The strong felt humbled, the weak felt strengthened, and even the skeptical felt their walls crumble as they watched love in its purest form move before them. And as the evening breeze swept across the hills and stars began to bloom in the sky, Jesus continued to heal the sick, comfort the trembling, lift the weary, and fill the hungry with both bread and hope. Every miracle was like a whispered promise that God had not forgotten his people, and every embrace, every prayer, every touch from Jesus carried the message that no life was too damaged, no heart too shattered, no soul too distant to be restored. And in the glow of that night, they realized that to be near Jesus was to taste life as it was meant to be, a whole, fearless, and filled with a love that never ends. And Jesus remained with the people, his presence unfolding like a gentle sunrise that refused to fade. And all who gathered around him felt a peace so deep it seemed to hush the very earth. Those who had once been restless found themselves standing still, breathing slowly, as though the weight they had carried for years was finally sliding off their shoulders. Jesus looked at each face, a tired mother's, wounded father's, lonely young men, trembling elders. And in every one of them he saw a precious child of God, someone worth healing, worth feeding, worth saving. And he spoke again, not with thunder, but with a quiet authority that wrapped itself around every heart. A blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. These words didn't just enter their ears. They settled into their souls, awakening something long asleep, a longing to be whole, to be clean, to be held by the one who created them. People who had come only for physical bread suddenly found themselves craving spiritual life, because the way Jesus spoke made them feel as though God's kingdom was not far away but standing right in front of them. The sick continued to come, limping, coughing, carried by friends or dragging themselves through the dust, and Jesus touched them with a kindness that brought tears to even the strongest hearts. blind eyes open like dawn, breaking across the horizon, ears that had never heard, became alive with the sound of birds and wind and the whispers of loved ones and voices that had been silent for years, shouted praises into the night. And through all this, Jesus asked for nothing in return. His love was not bought, not earned, not bargained for. It was freely given, flowing out of him like a river that could never run dry. Even those who felt unworthy dared to step closer, their hearts trembling, afraid he might turn them away, but he took their hands with such gentleness that every fear melted instantly, and he reminded them that the Father's love was not for the perfect, but for the repentant, not for the strong, but for the willing, not for those who hide, but for those who come into the light. The crowd grew quiet as Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven once more, and in his prayer they felt a love so vast. It seemed to cover every wound, every regret, every sorrow they had ever carried. And under the canopy of stars, they understood that Jesus not only fed the hungry and healed the broken, he awakened hope, restored dignity, and breathed life into hearts that had forgotten how to dream. And Jesus kept walking among them, not as a distant teacher or a ruler demanding honor, but as a shepherd searching for every lost and hurting soul. And the people followed him with a trust they did not fully understand, drawn by a love they had never experienced before. Even those who had once doubted him felt their resistance melting away, because nothing in his eyes looked like judgment. Only mercy, only compassion, only the promise that their lives still had meaning. Jesus spoke again, his voice steady and gentle. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst. And these words sank deep into their spirits, filling them with a warmth that reached wounds no medicine or doctor had ever touched. Broken families felt hope rise. Again, friendships that had been torn apart found the courage to forgive, and hearts burdened with past sins felt the first breath of freedom. Night settled softly over the hills, but no one wanted to leave, because the darkness around them seemed powerless in the presence of the one called the light of the world. Some knelt at his feet, overwhelmed by the peace that washed over them like gentle rain, while others lifted their hands in quiet gratitude, unable to speak, but feeling their hearts overflow with life. And Jesus, knowing every unspoken prayer, every silent cry, continued to pour out healing. As easily as breathing, the lame stood up and walked with trembling joy. The hopeless felt faith spark again, and the weary found their strength renewed, as if heaven itself had touched their souls. Even the cold wind felt softened, as though creation recognized its creator walking among his children. And Jesus said, I have come that you may have life, and have it more abundantly. And when the people heard this, it was as though chains fell away from their spirits. The burdens of yesterday no longer felt like prisons, because in Jesus they saw a future shining with forgiveness, purpose, and new beginnings. Mothers held their healed children close. Fathers wiped tears they could not explain. Young men and women felt courage rise like fire in their hearts, and the elderly smiled with a peace they had longed for their entire lives. And through it all, Jesus kept embracing, healing, teaching, and lifting each soul, as though they were the only one in the world, proving with every breath that his love was boundless, eternal, and unstoppable. In that moment, under the vast night sky, they understood. Where Jesus is, fear fades, sorrow breaks, hunger is fed, and every broken heart begins to shine again, with the hope of a new dawn. And Jesus continued to stand among them, the night air quiet but alive with a holy stillness, as if all of creation paused to listen to the words of the one who held eternity. in his hands. The people pressed closer, their hearts beating with a mixture of awe and longing, because every moment near him felt like stepping out of darkness into a light that warmed the deepest part of their souls. Jesus looked over the crowd, seeing not just faces but lives. Lives filled with worry, disappointment, guilt, dreams, and silent pain. And with a compassion deeper than the oceans, he said, backslash. The words wrapped around them like a shelter, reminding them that they were not wandering through life alone, not forgotten, not unseen, but held in the care of a shepherd who would never abandon them. Some in the crowd began to cry softly, not out of sorrow, but because the love they felt was too overwhelming to hold inside. Others reached out their hands toward him, as if touching even the edge of his presence could lift the heaviness in their hearts. And it did. Jesus moved through them, placing his hand on shoulders, lifting chins, wiping tears, blessing children and comforting the elderly. And with every touch, something invisible yet powerful happened. Guilt dissolved, shame faded, fear loosened its grip, and hope bloomed like spring after a long winter. He reminded them that the Father's heart was open wide, not toward the flawless, but toward the broken, the weary, and the repentant. And as the embers of a nearby fire flickered gently in the breeze, Jesus continued speaking, his words flowing with a softness that carried the weight of heaven. A peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Not as the world gives do I give. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. These words fell over the crowd like a holy blanket, calming anxious minds and steadying trembling souls. The troubled felt anchored. For the first time, those carrying heartbreak felt comfort wrap around them like warm arms, and people who had lived in fear their whole lives felt courage rise like a flame that would not be extinguished. And then Jesus lifted his eyes toward the stars, praying once more for every person gathered there, for their families, their future, their souls, their burdens, their hidden wounds, their deepest hopes. And as he prayed, a quiet confidence settled over the crowd, a certainty that the God of heaven was closer than their own breath. They realized that Jesus did not come merely to heal bodies or feed empty stomachs, but to restore the human heart to its creator, to bring light into every shadow, and to awaken a life so full, so abundant, so eternal that nothing in this world could compare. And in that holy moment, under the vast night sky, every soul understood with overwhelming clarity that where Jesus walks, healing follows. Hope rises, hunger is fed, and every broken life begins to shine again with the promise of everlasting life. And Jesus remained with them even as the night grew deeper, his presence like a soft flame that could not be extinguished, drawing every heart closer with a love that felt stronger than the shadows around them. No one wanted to leave, because the peace they felt beside him was unlike anything the world had ever given. It was steady, gentle, and powerful enough to silence every fear they had carried for years. Jesus looked at the crowd with eyes full of eternal kindness, and he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And at that moment it seemed as though the darkness itself stepped back, unable to stand before the one who brought light wherever he walked. The people listened, their hearts wide open, as Jesus continued to breathe life into their weary spirits. Those who had lived under the weight of failure felt forgiveness wash over them like a pure river, and those who had believed they were too broken to be made whole felt his words, stitching their souls back together. Men who had once been hardened by life found themselves softened by his mercy, and women who had carried silent pain finally felt understood. Even the children sensed the holiness of the moment, their small hands reaching toward him with innocent trust, and Jesus welcomed them with a smile that carried the brilliance of heaven. Then Jesus lifted his hands over the crowd, and as he blessed them, the atmosphere changed. It was as if a heavenly breeze moved through every heart, lifting burdens, calming storms, and planting seeds of hope that would grow long after the night had passed. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he may die, yet shall he live. These words stirred something eternal inside them, awakening the realization that his power reached far beyond sickness, hunger, or sadness. His power touched eternity itself. People began to whisper to one another, not with fear, but with awe. Surely God is with him. Surely this is the one who brings life. And they felt it, not just in their minds, but deep in their spirits. Every miracle they had witnessed, every word he spoke, every gentle gesture of compassion, was a testimony that heaven had drawn near. Jesus moved through the crowd once more, and wherever he walked, peace followed. Like a shadow, those tormented by anxiety felt calm, settle inside them like a quiet lake. Those who had felt unlovable realized they were cherished by the God who formed them. Those who had been empty found themselves overflowing with a new, radiant joy. And as the stars shimmered above them, Jesus spoke one more truth that sank into their souls. I have loved you with an everlasting love. I will never leave you nor forsake you. The people held on to these words as if they were holding on to life itself, because in them they felt the heartbeat of God, steady, faithful, unending. And under the vast night sky, they understood more clearly than ever that being near Jesus meant healing, restoration, purpose, hope, and a love so powerful that no darkness could ever overcome it. And Jesus continued to stand at the center of the gathering, his presence like a living fire, warming every cold and wounded place inside the hearts of the people, and they drew even nearer because something in him made them feel safe in ways nothing else ever had. The night was quiet, but it was not an ordinary silence. It was the holy stillness of heaven touching earth. People who had once been afraid to speak now found courage rising within them. Simply because Jesus was near, he looked at them with a love that felt endless, a love that made even the hardest soul soften like clay in gentle hands. And with that voice that carried both tenderness and authority, he said, I did not come to condemn the world, but to save it. These words spread through the crowd like a gentle wind, lifting shame, dissolving fear, reminding every person that God's desire was not to push them away, but to draw them close. Many fell to their knees without even realizing it, overwhelmed by the weight of his mercy. Men who had spent years hiding their pain felt the freedom to let their tears fall. Women who had been overlooked by society felt honored, seen, lifted. Young people who had been searching for meaning suddenly felt purpose, igniting inside them like a new star in the sky. Even the elderly, carrying decades of burden, felt strength return to their bones. As hope surged through them, Jesus moved among them, and every step he took seemed to heal an unseen wound, restore a broken dream, or breathe life into a dying hope. He raised his hands again and spoke another truth, one that pierced through every layer of doubt. The Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost at the moment. He said it, those who had felt farthest from God, the sinners, the broken, the forgotten, felt something inside them lighten, as if chains that had been wrapped around their hearts were cracking open. They realized they were not lost because they had been abandoned, but because they had not known where to turn. And now they saw clearly that Jesus himself was the way home. The crowd pressed closer still, their faces illuminated by the glow of the moon and the glow of hope, rekindling in their hearts. Jesus laid his hands on the sick, and their bodies awakened with strength they had never known. He touched the fearful, and courage rose within them like a shield. He spoke to the discouraged, and suddenly their hearts felt steady and alive. Some laughed with joy they couldn't contain. Others simply stood in silence, breathing in the peace that settled upon them like heavenly dew. And then Jesus said, with a voice filled with unfathomable love, come to me, all of you today. Not just the righteous, not just the strong, not just the ones who looked put together, but all, the weary, the ashamed, the forgotten, the lonely, the lost, the hopeful, the hungry, the broken. And when they heard this invitation, something eternal awakened inside them, a longing to stay close to the one who carried the love of heaven in every word, every step, every breath. And under the shimmering stars, they felt a truth deeper than anything they had ever known. Where Jesus is, every darkness begins to fade, every wound begins to heal, and every heart discovers that it was created for the love he came to give. And Jesus continued, speaking into the deep silence of the night, his words flowing like living water into every heart, and the people drank them in as though their souls had been thirsty for years. The glow of the moon fell softly across his face, but the true light came from him, a light that reached into the darkness people carried inside, exposing nothing to shame, but everything to heal. He looked over the crowd with deep compassion, seeing every hidden wound, every quiet fear, every whispered prayer they thought no one heard. And he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. These words did not merely instruct them, they lifted them, reminding each person that the path to peace, purpose, and eternal hope was standing right in front of them. In human form, people who had wandered through life feeling directionless suddenly felt anchored, as if their souls had found a home they never knew existed. Others who had chased truth in 100 broken places realized that truth wasn't a distant idea. It was a person who knew their name and loved them completely. And the brokenhearted, the ones who felt like fragments that could never be put back together, discovered that life, a real life, abundant life, was being offered to them freely in the hands of Jesus. He began to walk through the crowd again, and with every step, the atmosphere seemed to tremble with holy peace. Those who had suffered for years felt hope rising like a fire in the cold. Those who had been consumed by regrets felt forgiveness washing over them, loosening the chains of their past. Even the skeptics who had come out of curiosity or doubt felt their resistance softening as his love touched places they never admitted were hurting. Jesus placed his hand on the shoulders of the weary, and strength flowed into them like a river. He touched the faces of the tearful, and joy began to bloom where sorrow had been rooted for so long. He spoke to the fearful, and boldness awakened like a roaring flame within their hearts. He looked into the eyes of the lonely and whispered a truth that made them tremble with hope. I am with you always. The people felt a warmth spreading through the entire gathering, not from the night air, not from the fires burning nearby, but from the presence of the one who carried heaven within him. Children clung to his robe, feeling safe in a way they could not explain. Mothers held their healed children and whispered prayers of gratitude. Fathers stood tall again, courage returning to their spirits. The elderly felt youth stirring in their bones, as if the breath of God had revived their tired bodies. And then Jesus spoke, words so tender, so powerful, that the entire crowd seemed to hold its breath. I have come to give you life, not for a moment, not for a day, but forever. You are mine, and I have loved you from the beginning. Tears streamed down the faces of many, because this love was unlike anything they had ever known. A love that did not depend on perfection, a love that did not fade with time, a love that reached the deepest, darkest corners of the human soul and filled them with light. And under the endless sky, with the stars shimmering like tiny echoes of heaven, the people realized with overwhelming clarity that being in the presence of Jesus meant stepping into a love so powerful, so healing, so eternal, that no pain could survive, no fear could remain, and no broken heart could stay the same. And Jesus remained in the midst of the people, his presence wrapping around them like a warm cloak, steady and unshakable. And the night seemed to stand still, as every soul leaned closer, hungry for more of the life that flowed from his words. The firelight flickered across their faces, but a far greater light shone inside them, the light of hope reborn. Jesus lifted his gaze toward the heavens, and when his eyes returned to the crowd, it felt as though he was looking into the deepest places of each heart. With a voice both gentle and full of authority, he said, I am the vine, you are the branches. Remain in me, and you will bear much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. These words settled into their spirits like seeds falling into fertile soil, awakening a desire to stay connected to him forever, to cling to the one who brought life into every barren place inside them. The people felt their hearts open wide, wider than they had ever dared before. Some had lived years feeling useless or forgotten, believing their lives held no purpose. But Jesus' words breathed destiny into them, telling them they were created to flourish, to shine, to grow in ways they never imagined. Others who had tried to walk through life relying on their own strength suddenly understood that true strength came not from themselves, but from staying close to him, drawing life from his love the way branches draw life from a vine. And those who had felt empty, hollowed out by loss, by heartbreak, by disappointment, felt themselves filling with a quiet joy as his truth settled into the hidden corners of their souls. Jesus stepped closer to the crowd, and his presence radiated a peace that calmed the restlessness inside every mind. He reached out his hands, and the people pressed forward, not to be healed of sickness alone, but to receive the spiritual healing that came from knowing they belonged to him. He whispered words of comfort to those who trembled from grief, and their tears became lighter, falling from their eyes like rain that nourishes the dry earth. He spoke hope into those who feared the future, reminding them that the Father who loved them had power over every tomorrow. He touched the weary and breathed strength into them. He touched the ashamed and covered them with mercy. He touched the hopeless and reignited their fire, turning despair into purpose. And then Jesus declared, with a love so deep it felt like eternity breaking into time, you did not choose me, but I chose you. The crowd gasped softly, their hearts overwhelmed by the realization that the God of heaven had not overlooked them, had not passed them by, but had chosen them personally, intentionally, lovingly. Those who had always believed they were too broken felt worthy for the first time. Those who had been searching for belonging felt claimed. Those who had been wandering felt guided. It was as if his words wrapped around every heart like strong arms, holding them close and lifting them higher. The night deepened, but no one felt the darkness, because Jesus stood among them like a living sunrise. His love washed over them, again and again, unending, unstoppable. And they knew, with a certainty, stronger than anything they had ever known, that where Jesus stands, hearts awaken, lives transform, wounds heal, and every soul discovers the beautiful truth that they are loved beyond measure, forever and without end. And Jesus stayed among the people, and the night around them felt almost holy, as if heaven itself had bent low to rest upon the earth. No one moved away because leaving him felt impossible. His presence was like life itself, like breath, like the steady heartbeat of hope that every soul had been missing. Jesus's eyes shone with a love so deep it seemed to reach through time, touching every broken memory, every wounded moment, every fear the people carried, and with a voice soft enough to soothe the smallest child, yet strong enough to steady the trembling heart, he said, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Remain in my love. These words fell over them like warm rain, sinking into the soil of their souls, making barren places bloom with courage, faith, and purpose. These words fell over them like warm rain, sinking into the soil of their souls, making barren places bloom with courage, faith, and purpose. For many in the crowd, it was the first time they had ever felt truly loved, not for what they could give, not for how strong they were, not for how perfect they appeared, but simply because they existed. Jesus's love was unlike the world's. It did not fade, did not waver, did not depend on human approval. It was steady, fierce, eternal. Those who had lived their lives running from pain suddenly felt safe enough to rest. Those who had tried to earn love finally realized they didn't need to strive anymore. Those who carried secret guilt felt it lifting from their shoulders, like a heavy cloak being taken away forever. Jesus walked among them again, his steps gentle and intentional. When he touched someone, it was as if time paused to watch him mend what life had broken. The man with trembling hands felt them steady instantly. The woman who had cried for years felt joy rise in her chest, like sunlight after a storm. The young boy who had been afraid of everything felt courage bloom inside him, like a mighty tree. And even those who had convinced themselves that they didn't need help felt something inside soften, because his presence brought truth, and his truth brought freedom. Then Jesus spoke again, his voice carrying across the gathering. With holy clarity, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. The people felt these words echo inside them like the heartbeat of God himself. No one had ever promised them this. A love that protects, a love that holds, a love that cannot be taken away. Those who had feared abandonment their whole lives suddenly felt anchored in a love that would outlast death itself. Those who had felt unworthy knew they were cherished. Those who had felt insecure found stability in his unshakable promise. The wind shifted softly through the trees, but even the breeze seemed to move. In reverence, Jesus lifted his hands once more, and a peace so powerful swept over the people that many fell to their knees, not in fear, but in overwhelming gratitude. They felt the weight of years, of mistakes, of shame, of sorrow, crumble and vanish like dust before the eternal love standing before them. Some whispered prayers, some laughed through tears, some simply closed their eyes and let his presence heal them without a word. And under the deep, star-filled sky, the truth settled into every heart. Like a glowing ember, where Jesus is, love becomes real, hope becomes strong, fear becomes small, and every broken life learns that it was always held in the gentle, mighty hands of the Savior, who never lets go.